In the 6th year of my secret marriage to Cyrus Foster, we decided to secretly divorce. This was to prevent his new girlfriend from being labeled a homewrecker. "I don't want anyone to know we were ever married," he said. I nodded silently, saying nothing, but added an extra 0 to the financial settlement. Cyrus's face darkened. "Is money all you care about?" I let out a soft laugh. "After all these years of marriage, you know me best." Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Cyrus was hospitalized after drinking too much. The nurse asked, "Who here is the patient's family?" Ellen Harvey and I both stood up. "I am," I said. "It's me," Ellen said at the same time. The nurse frowned. "So which one of you is it?" Ellen quickly stepped forward. "It's me." "Tell me what I need to know." The nurse explained the overnight care instructions. Ellen listened attentively. I turned to look at Cyrus. His breathing was heavy, his brows furrowed. The corners of his eyes were red, but his lips were deathly pale. I hadn't seen him like this in years. Alcohol tolerance can be built up, but it's mostly down to constitution. And Cyrus was allergic to alcohol. Ellen was warming his hands, tears in her eyes. For the other woman to go to such lengths made things rather awkward for me, the original wife. I hesitated, wondering if I should leave, when she spoke up. "It's all my fault. He wouldn't have drunk so much if it weren't for me." My assistant had filled me in on what happened before I arrived. At the dinner party, someone had tried to get Ellen to drink with him. Cyrus had intervened. The man had sneered, "If you're too scared to drink, she'd be better off with me." Cyrus was well past the age of rash actions. But that night, something snapped, and he ended up in a drinking contest. Anyone who knew Cyrus was aware of his low alcohol tolerance. But when he was determined to outdrink someone, he'd risk his life to do it. In his reckless youth, this behavior had landed him in hospital several times. The last time was in our 2nd year of marriage. He was in hospital coughing up blood while I had a car accident on the motorway. After that, he changed his ways. Ellen asked, "Miss Sterling, did he used to protect you like this too?" I forced a smile. "I'll head off now that you're here with him." "Miss Sterling," Ellen called out urgently. She bit her lip, as if steeling herself for something. "I told Cyrus I want to get married." He agreed. 2 days ago, I had to turn my car around and rush back to the office because I'd left some important documents there. As I passed by Cyrus Foster's office, I noticed the light was still on. Ellen Harvey was sitting sideways on Cyrus's lap, her arms around his neck as she reclined in his embrace. In a coquettish voice, she said, "Cyrus, I want to get married." I don't make a habit of eavesdropping, but that sentence stopped me in my tracks. Cyrus wore a lazy smile, his eyes half closed as he ran his fingers through Ellen's long hair. "What's this? Is the little girl eager to be a bride?" "Not at all." Ellen huffed. "I just want to marry you." "Cyrus, will you marry me?" I stood outside the door, watching Cyrus intently through the half-open gap. He was silent for a long while. The smile faded from his face. He stared at me quietly, then softly said, "All right. Miss Sterling, Cyrus doesn't love you anymore." "He loves me now," Ellen declared with conviction. She looked at me, nervous yet proud. I lowered my gaze. "Congratulations, then." Cyrus returned to the office the following afternoon. He called me to his office as soon as he arrived. When I entered, he was wearily propping up his head, his thumb pressing hard against his temple. A hangover-induced migraine, no doubt. "Prepare the Sunbright Group project and hand it over to Ellen," he suddenly said, catching me off guard. "What?" I asked, stunned. He didn't repeat himself, just fixed me with a heavy stare. "The Sunbright Group project is crucial. Ellen is just starting out. Which is why she needs this opportunity, this big break, this impressive addition to her CV." I fell silent again. "Amelia, I'm not asking for your opinion," Cyrus said, drumming his fingers on the desk impatiently. Taking a deep breath, I unclenched my fists. "Fine. But I have one condition." Cyrus raised his chin, signaling me to continue. Keep the original team intact. Just change the project lead to her. Don't reduce the bonuses or profit sharing for the team members by even a penny. Agreed. I promise. Having secured Cyrus's agreement, I turned to leave. I spent the next hour and a half organizing everything and explaining the situation to the team. Their looks ranged from pity to sympathy, from indignation to fury. I rapped on the table. Don't let personal emotions interfere. This isn't about loyalty. It's just work, do the job, get paid. I returned to Cyrus's office with the documents. Ellen was there too, smiling as she fed Cyrus a cookie. Cyrus disliked all sweets, but he was accepting it reluctantly, albeit with a frown. Seeing me, Ellen quickly stood up straight. You two have things to discuss. I'll step out, she said. No need, Cyrus said, handing the cookie box back to Ellen. Go eat over there. Then he turned to me, his tone unfriendly. Next time, remember to knock. Had I not knocked? Come to think of it, I hadn't. Force of habit. There won't be a next time, I replied. What? I placed all the documents on Cyrus's desk. Meeting his suspicious gaze, I handed him the A4 sheet at the bottom of the pile. It was unmistakably a letter of resignation. Cyrus stared at it for 2 seconds before looking up, his eyes cold. What's the meaning of this? Are you trying to threaten me? I paused. You're overthinking it. I had this resignation letter prepared long ago, just waiting for the Sunbright Group project to end. Now that I've handed it over, all my work is complete. It's the perfect time to resign. Cyrus glowered at me, his face dark. Ellen seemed frightened. Miss Sterling, I won't do this project. Please don't be angry. I know I'm not qualified. I just wanted to learn from you. I'll step back. It's my fault. I apologize. Cyrus's expression grew even stormier. He took Ellen's hand. If you want to do it, he said. You don't need to apologize to anyone. You want to resign? He continued, turning back to me. You think the company can't function without you? Cyrus picked up a pen and scrawled his signature at the bottom of the letter. He tossed the resignation letter at my feet. Get out. I looked down at the paper that had landed on my shoe. There's one more thing, I said. Cyrus sat stone-faced, saying nothing. Since you and Ellen are getting married, shouldn't we end our marriage first? Even Ellen's sniffling stopped at that. She clutched Cyrus's arm, looking at him nervously yet expectantly. Cyrus's body stiffened. He slowly turned his head. What did you say? I said, why don't we get a divorce while we're at it? Cyrus Foster dismissed Ellen Harvey. She seemed reluctant but didn't defy him, only casting a hesitant glance at me as she left. Cyrus and I stood facing each other. He broke the silence first. How long have you been planning to resign? 6 months. So you've been preparing for divorce for 6 months, right? I neither confirmed nor denied it. Cyrus let out a scornful laugh. Amelia Sterling, what right do you have to ask for a divorce? I looked at him. Is there any point in discussing this now? You're right, there isn't. Cyrus took out a divorce agreement from the bottom drawer. You can set any conditions you want. Just one thing. I don't want anyone to gossip that Ellen is a homewrecker. So no one can know about our divorce. Or rather, I don't want anyone to know we were ever married. I skimmed through the agreement. I nodded. All right, no problem. Then I picked up the pen and added an extra 0 to the property division. Cyrus looked at me with sarcasm in his eyes. Amelia, in your heart, is there nothing but money? I curved my lips. After years of marriage, you still know me best. That day, I packed up all my things and left the company. Some people were gloating, some were reluctant to see me go. The one with the most complex emotions was probably Ellen Harvey. She seemed to want to say something but couldn't, yet the relief on her face was visible. Back home, suddenly not having to work, I felt a bit lost. All day I was like a cat with its tail cut off, not knowing what to do with myself. In the afternoon, my assistant sent me a message. Today Mr. Foster was like a fire-breathing dragon, even the future Mrs. Foster got the cold shoulder. Miss Sterling, I believe it won't be long before he realizes he's cut his own major artery. If you have any good opportunities, please take us with you. We all really want to follow you. I curved my lips slightly. Don't overthink it. As long as the Sunbright Group project is secured, the company still has a promising future. At least your salaries and benefits won't be compromised. As for me, I had no plans to work in the short term. In the evening, Delia Bell invited me out for drinks. Like clockwork, she asked every day. I replied, "Send me the location." The next second, her call came through. Well, the workaholic actually wants to rest. What happened? Did Cyrus go bankrupt? Hearing her vibrant voice, I couldn't help but smile. So are you going to let me come or not? Come on, hurry up. We've got a private room, drinks, and men, nothing's missing. I met Delia through Cyrus, but we unexpectedly became friends. She was one of the few people who knew Cyrus and I were married. So in the face of Cyrus's blatant affair, she, on one hand, couldn't stand the sight of him, and on the other hand, was dedicated to introducing men to me. In her words, if he can dish it out, he can't complain when you serve it back. Who knows, you might even have better luck than him. By the time I arrived, Delia was already in high spirits. Holding a glass, she was dancing and screaming surrounded by a group of 6-foot male models. Amelia, come here. She pushed the most handsome one towards me. The young man was also quite smooth, calling me sister while pouring me a drink. I smiled faintly and downed it in one go. All right, you guys can go out now. What do you mean? Amelia, you're such a killjoy. I massaged my temples helplessly. It's noisy. She winked at me suggestively. I thought you were just shy. I raised an eyebrow. Do I look that innocent to you? Of course not. So I don't understand, Cyrus is already like that, why are you still being faithful to him? Delia's bluntness was exasperating. If he cheats, and I cheat back, that's revenge. The word revenge is too strong, we're not at that point. Besides, his affair started after we fell apart. Does he admit that? Delia sat up straight, her eyes shining. I think I've discovered something important. I asked Delia what she meant, but she just kept being mysterious. All right. Actually, I mainly came to tell you that I'm going abroad in a while. What for? Travel? Business? Study. What? I got an acceptance letter from a business school, going for a master's degree. What about your job? You and Cyrus. I've already resigned, and as for Cyrus and me, we've agreed to go to the family court tomorrow. The path Cyrus and I have taken to this point was almost inevitable. I always thought I didn't have much feeling about it. But when Delia's eyes turned red, I couldn't help but feel a twinge in my heart. Is he being difficult again? No. Is he deliberately targeting you? No. Why should you be the one to resign? If anyone should leave, it should be him. Delia and I drank one glass after another. She berated Cyrus, feeling sorry for me and thinking it wasn't fair. I guess love is the only thing in this world where input and return are not proportional. It's strange how two people who once loved each other end up both feeling they've been wronged. Cyrus Foster and I met in secondary school. He shouldn't have come to our small town. But due to family issues, he had to transfer to be near his grandfather. Back then, he was rebellious and defiant. Not long after the term started, he was among the first to be publicly reprimanded. While others were at least obedient when admitting their mistakes. He remained nonchalant even when standing before the entire school. I disliked people like that and wanted nothing to do with them. However, when he was falsely accused, I couldn't help but stand up and testify for him. From that day on, he followed me from school to my house, only leaving when I went upstairs. Without me, you'd have been targeted for revenge by now. Good girl, stay out of these things in the future. He didn't care about anything fighting, false accusations, misunderstandings, punishments, none of it bothered him. But when my father's fist finished with my mum and was about to fall on me, Cyrus rushed forward and knocked him down with one kick. My mum screamed, steadying my father while glaring at me furiously, calling me a slag. Cyrus froze. The next second, he grabbed my hand and we ran. He made me a bowl of noodles. They were overcooked and mushy. Too much soy sauce made them overly salty. The vegetables were added too late and remained raw. It was the worst bowl of noodles I'd ever had, yet I finished every last drop. In our tumultuous youth, we were two lonely souls keeping each other warm and supporting each other as we moved forward. But everyone was against us. The school opposed teenage relationships. Cyrus's family looked down on me. I've seen plenty of social climbers, but never one so young. My mom's eyes flashed with anger as she slapped me, saying I was a disgrace. Cyrus was forcibly taken away, and I became an outcast at school. But he escaped, bringing all his holiday money, injuring his leg in the process. He said, "Let's elope." I held him, resting my head against his. 1 year. We'll get into the same university. Then no one can stop us. Just 1 year. Cyrus arrived at the family court before me. As I got out of the car, I saw him standing there, eyes narrowed, a cigarette between his fingers, thumb pressing against his temple. Noticing my gaze, he looked up and put out his cigarette. "Shall we?" The divorce process went very smoothly. When I received the divorce certificate, I couldn't help but let out a long sigh. "What about your things in the house?" "Throw them away." We turned and went our separate ways. There was still much left for me to do. I contacted a familiar decluttering service and asked them to remove all the mail items from the house and pack up everything else. Halfway through the process, a young girl came out of the study with a 36-inch picture frame. "Miss, what should I do with this?" Inside the spiderweb cracked glass was an enlarged red marriage registration photo. Looking at the two people in the picture, heads together, beaming with happiness, I felt a bit dazed. This was the photo Cyrus and I had hung above our bed, in place of a wedding photo. Back then, we didn't have a wedding photo shoot or ceremony, just quietly registered our marriage without telling anyone. The reason was his family's disapproval. If we insisted on being together, we could only have a secret marriage. I didn't mind, but Cyrus was upset about it for a long time. At first, he said he'd make it up to me once he was established, and we'd make our marriage public. Later, he said it didn't matter, as long as we were happy, we didn't need others to know. Then eventually, he smashed the frame, snarling, "I'm so glad I listened to my mom." Throw away the frame and shred the photo. After taking care of everything, I boarded a flight out of the country a week later. I changed my number and didn't tell anyone except Delia. My first days abroad were chaotic. Finding accommodation, familiarizing myself with the area, buying necessities, enrolling in school. The unfamiliar environment and language left me feeling lost. But soon, the busy academic life dispelled all of that. During a video call with Delia one night, she said, "I ran into Cyrus today. He doesn't know you've gone abroad, does he?" "No." "No wonder. What happened?" Delia said someone at dinner had asked about me, wondering why they hadn't seen me in a while. Ellen Harvey eagerly jumped in, "Amelia has already resigned. I'll be handling all her work from now on. You can contact me for anything." Just as she disliked Cyrus, Delia also disliked Ellen. She coolly replied, "Your little company certainly can't afford our Amelia." Of course she left for better opportunities. Cyrus smirked sarcastically. "She's found a new job." "No, she's gone abroad. You should have seen Cyrus when he heard you'd left the country. He stood up so abruptly that he spilled a bowl of hot soup on Ellen's leg. Ellen cried out in pain, but Cyrus ignored her, just staring at me, his face turning pale. I listened to Delia's account as mere gossip, not taking it to heart. 3 days later, Delia contacted me, fuming. "I'm going to kill Cyrus. He comes to the office every day to ambush me, asking where you've gone. When I ask why he's looking for you, he doesn't answer. And he reeks of cigarette smoke, enough to choke someone." I was silent for a few seconds. "If you're bothered, just tell him." "It's fine, You don't need to keep it a secret. I never intended to hide it from him anyway. I just didn't think it was necessary to tell him. But Delia firmly refused. No way. Why should I tell him anything? I'm not telling him. Oh, and get ready to welcome me. I'm coming over in 10 days for your birthday. Delia always cared a great deal about birthdays and holidays. Perhaps it was the romantic in her. She not only prepared gifts for me but also expected the same in return. As someone who never paid much attention to birthdays growing up, I found myself oddly invested in them as an adult. That day was a bit chilly when I went to pick up Delia from the airport. As soon as she saw me, she gave me a big hug. You've lost weight. Your chin's sharper. But you look energetic. Seems you haven't been suffering too much. I smiled and took her back to my place. While she was showering, I slipped out the door. Under the dim streetlights, Cyrus stood there wrapped in a black coat. He had turned up his collar, hiding his chin. His gaze was heavy, seeming to envelop me entirely when he looked at me. Are you following Delia? She'll be angry if she finds out. Cyrus didn't speak, just kept looking at me. After a long silence, he turned and left. Cyrus was not in a good state. He had a fever. An inexplicable low-grade fever had been tormenting him for a week. He couldn't sleep well. Ever since Amelia asked for a divorce, he hadn't had a good night's rest. When he learned Amelia had gone abroad, his insomnia reached its peak. Anxious and lost, he felt as if he was suddenly placed on the edge of a cliff. No one was holding on to him. He could fall at any moment. Sitting on a bench in a foreign country, though the place was unfamiliar, Cyrus suddenly felt relieved and a bit drowsy. Ellen's call came through. She screamed hysterically, "You went to find her? You're already divorced. Didn't you say you wanted to start over? Didn't we agree?" Cyrus's breathing was steady. "We also agreed that you'd act with me." Ellen suddenly went quiet. Just as Cyrus was about to hang up, she started crying. "But you didn't refuse when I hugged you. We kissed. You said you'd try with me. I could feel it, you like me. Cyrus, please come back. I'll be with you to start over, let's start over." Cyrus had already closed his eyes, relaxing back into his seat. "But you're not her. Then what about me? I love you." Cyrus hung up the phone and turned it off. He had found Amelia. This calmed his heart. Cyrus's appearance left me feeling a bit dazed. His silence made it seem as if he was just passing by, with no particular purpose. But he had clearly followed Delia here. I didn't know what he was trying to do. Delia stayed for 3 days, went shopping, had meals out, and even played student in our classroom for a bit. Your class has quite a few quality men, broad shoulders, narrow waists, long legs, six-pack abs. If you ever get lonely, you could always relieve some stress. I covered her mouth. Thanks, but no thanks. TSK, not even 30 and living such an ascetic life. That afternoon, I saw her off at the airport. She hugged me, reluctant to let go. "When are you coming back home?" "During the holidays." "Are you sure? You're not going to stay away forever, are you?" "I won't. I still need to go back to find a job. Start a company. I'll get my brother to invest in you." I laughed, patting her back. "All right, go on in. Have a safe flight." As I left the airport, a black car pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down, and Cyrus spoke, "Get in, I'll give you a lift." In that brief encounter the other day, I hadn't noticed how much weight Cyrus had lost. The dark circles under his eyes, his whole demeanor depressed and gloomy. I opened the car door and got in. He drove me back to my place, clearly familiar with the route. I said, "Let's talk." I invited Cyrus into my home. I was brewing coffee in the kitchen while he sat on the sofa. By the time I came out with 2 cups of coffee, Cyrus had fallen asleep. He was in a deep slumber, even snoring lightly. I stared at him expressionlessly for a long time, then turned to make a phone call. When I finished the call, Cyrus had woken up. "I'm sorry, I fell asleep," he said. Taking a deep breath, I asked him. You didn't tell your mother about our divorce? Cyrus froze. Why did you come looking for me? What do you want, Cyrus? Cyrus lowered his head, fidgeting with the coffee cup in his hands. I keep wondering how things ended up like this. Where exactly did it go wrong? Everything was fine, but suddenly one day, it all disappeared. Amelia, let's start over. I can't let go. You won. Delia's words suddenly echoed in my ears. Did he admit it? It seemed that even now, he hadn't acknowledged our emotional breakdown. He just treated it as a game between us. This suddenly made me feel sad. It had been too many years, my entanglement with Cyrus, too many years. All the joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness flashed through my mind. It's not that I didn't care, I just chose not to think about it. We should be moving forward, not backwards. How could we go back? Crash into a dead end? We can't go back. My clenched fists made my whole body tremble. My mouth opened and closed, but I couldn't utter a word. My eyes burned hot. Finally, I turned and rushed into the bedroom, slamming the door shut. That night, I lay awake until dawn. As the sky began to lighten, I heard the front door close. Cyrus had left. I dozed off fitfully, only to be startled awake by the alarm clock. When I came out after changing, Cyrus was placing breakfast on the table. You're up. Come and eat after you've freshened up. I stood at the door with a wooden expression, silently watching him. After a long standoff, he left. But when I returned from class, I found he had moved in downstairs. Delia was furious. Cyrus came to see you? How did he know where you were? It wasn't me, was it? No, it has nothing to do with you. What does he want? It doesn't matter. Amelia, don't fall for him again. You've suffered too much these past years. For the first time in 2 months since going abroad, I lit a cigarette. During dinner time, Cyrus knocked on my door, saying he had baked some fish and asked if I wanted to eat together. I spoke up again. We need to talk. Cyrus and I got into the same university. We dated, started a business, got married. Each step was incredibly difficult. Until the final breakup, it was 12 years of time. What should we talk about? How should we talk about it? We couldn't even find a starting point. Cyrus spoke first. Ellen and I were fake. I knew. A girl who rear-ended him on an electric bicycle couldn't afford to pay the compensation. So she had to pay in installments. He deliberately let me see their chat history. Seeing that I was unmoved, he recruited the girl into the company and had me personally mentor her. When the girl was mistreated by a client, he questioned me. Is this how you take care of my people? I said, everyone's the same, this is how I came up too. He sneered coldly, compared to her, you're not even worthy. He never avoided suspicion, making everyone think the girl was the future boss's wife. When he fell ill, the girl was concerned. Miss Sterling, Cyrus is suffering too much. Can you stop hurting him? I knew Cyrus was doing it on purpose. He was upset, he was angry, so he wanted to take it out on me 100, 1,000 times over. But our problems have little to do with Ellen. She's quite nice, pure, cheerful, and she likes you. If you want to start a new relationship, she's a good choice. Cyrus looked at me with an inscrutable expression. After a while, he laughed, absurd and sarcastic. Amelia, sometimes I wonder if you have any feelings at all. At any time, for any choice you make, you're always weighing the pros and cons. You're so calm, it's almost cold. Amelia, do you remember we once had a child? If it weren't for you, he would have been born by now. Finally, Cyrus said those words. My heart contracted violently, stopping for a moment. I looked up at the spotless ceiling. Softly, I said, it's strange. When that child was in my womb for 3 months, you had no feelings for him. But when I aborted him, he suddenly became everyone's beloved baby. Cyrus and I had a child together. The child came at an inopportune time, just as the company was preparing for its critical IPO phase. Moreover, I was experiencing severe pregnancy symptoms. Cyrus, concerned for my well-being, suggested I take leave to rest properly. I refused, pushing through my discomfort to navigate the business world. Finally, I started bleeding. Cyrus was furious and forced me to be hospitalized for bed rest. I spent a week in the hospital, my laptop and phone constantly active. Cyrus, with a grim expression, smashed my laptop. "Do you think the world stops turning without you?" he demanded. We had a massive argument. Cyrus unilaterally declared, "I'm transferring your work to others. You're not working anymore. Stay home and rest." This isn't up for discussion. He was worried about me and cared for the baby. My condition was indeed poor. I compromised, but I was reluctant to leave the professional world. I would inquire about the company's recent situation, ask about project progress, and express interest in sitting in on important meetings. Cyrus refused each request. "Just focus on your pregnancy at home. Once the baby is born, you'll need to care for it. Where will you find the time?" I was stunned. I only took a 2-week leave. Cyrus pressed his lips together. "Amelia, stop working," he said. "Just stay home, read books, drink tea, tend to some plants. Do you know how much I envy those who have a light left on for them at home? Unlike us, always busy. Look at our house. Does it feel lived in at all? The company is on track now. From now on, I'll handle the outside world, you take care of the home. Besides, with a child, someone needs to be there. Surely you don't want them to grow up like us, devoid of family warmth?" It was absurd. Cyrus and I had been together for so many years. We were partners, lovers, friends, and even competitors. But in the end, he told me he wanted a dutiful wife to look after the home and children. We had the most intense argument in our history, followed by a Cold War. I ended my leave and returned to the office immediately. Cyrus was furious. "You only think about yourself, disregarding everything else? Go home." "I'll speak to HR. I coldly replied, "About what? That I've been fired, or are you going to dismiss me? What right do you have to process my resignation? Who even knows we're married?" Cyrus's face darkened. "Is that the issue? Fine, when the child is born, I'll announce it at the full moon celebration. Is that satisfactory?" Those words silenced me completely. I couldn't understand when publicizing our marriage had become a condition to manipulate me. Of course, all this wasn't enough to make me terminate the pregnancy. I endured the inner turmoil, physical discomfort, and confrontations with Cyrus, until I accidentally overheard his conversation with his mother. This pregnancy was unexpected. We had been trying, but it still happened. As if it were destined. But according to Cyrus, it was deliberate. He intentionally got me pregnant at this juncture. Otherwise, once the company went public, it would be even harder to make me leave. His mother agreed, "That's why I told you to have her sign a prenuptial agreement, but you refused. After the child is born, make her sign this agreement. Everything will go to the child in the future. Even if you divorce, she won't get a penny." Cyrus was displeased. "I've told you, don't scheme against her. Is this scheming? I'm doing this for your own good. Women become wild when they don't focus on home. Look at your life, does it resemble that of a married man? Not even a hot meal, no one to tidy your clothes. Amelia isn't the docile type. If you don't make her completely dependent on you, how can you control her?" Cyrus remained silent. He had held on to that agreement for a long time, finally putting it in his bag. I knew he had taken it to heart. It chilled me to the bone. How ironic. A child, still just an embryo, had become my weakness. It was a tool for others to manipulate and bind me. I had to give up myself for it. Could I do it? I couldn't. I was cold, detached, selfish. So after just one night of consideration, I scheduled an abortion. Cyrus Foster was trembling. I just wanted a normal family life. "Was I wrong?" he said. "Husband, wife, children, a family has its divisions of labor. We all have to make sacrifices. Why can't you?" I looked at Cyrus. "Why does it have to be me?" I asked. You work, you start a business, is it all just for your wife and children, for the family? That's your dream, your career, your achievement. What about my dreams, my career, my achievements? Cyrus, if you want to find a good wife and mother, go find one. Don't try to turn me into that. Cyrus's face fell, and he looked at me with some trepidation. Just like that 17-year-old boy who held me with his injured leg all those years ago. Cyrus had returned to the UK. His collaboration with Sunbright Group was imminent. I had to go to university and had also taken on a consulting job for a company. I was run off my feet. After having this conversation with Cyrus, I thought we wouldn't see each other again. But a few days later, he appeared downstairs again. After a silent stare, I wanted to ignore him and leave. But he suddenly called out to me. I brought some of your favorite food. Let's have dinner together tonight. Cyrus, you're wasting your time. You must be very busy at the stage. Don't do these meaningless things. I'm free at the moment, and it's not meaningless. I looked at him suspiciously. Shouldn't you be pushing forward with your project with Sunbright Group at this stage? It didn't go through. He said those words lightly, but my ears rang for a few seconds. What did you say? There was a small problem with the Sunbright project. We didn't sign. Cyrus, do you know what you're saying? It's just one business deal. You don't need to react so strongly. Cyrus, you're too arrogant. You don't know what you've lost. After parting ways with Cyrus on bad terms, I went to university. On the way, I called Delia and asked her to tell her brother to try and pick up Sunbright's leftovers if possible. At the same time, I asked her, do you know why it fell through? Delia paused. I heard a bit of news. Apparently there was some conflict during the signing, and Cyrus hit someone. By the way, is the Sunbright collaboration very profitable? She asked. I made a sound of agreement. It's like setting up a pension plan for your brother's company. Really? Although Delia was skeptical, she still told her brother. Half an hour later, my bank card received a 7-figure transfer. My brother says thank you, Delia messaged. In the evening, I returned home and heard crying before I even went upstairs. It was Ellen Harvey. How can you say you don't like me? You do like me, I can feel it. Otherwise you wouldn't have given up the Sunbright project for me. Wake up, Cyrus. You and Amelia Sterling have no future together. Can you honestly say that during the time we've been together? Even if it was an act, you didn't develop real feelings? Standing downstairs, I hesitated. I didn't want to get involved in their affairs. But I was too tired. I just wanted to fall into bed and sleep. In the end, I still walked up. Turning the corner, I saw Ellen tightly hugging Cyrus, crying uncontrollably. Cyrus's expression was complex, his hands at his sides clenching and unclenching. Until he noticed me. In an instant, he pushed Ellen away. Ellen hit the wall with a muffled groan. I reflexively reached out to steady her, but she angrily shook me off. Amelia, I'm begging you, can you stay away from Cyrus? Just let him go. Shut up, Cyrus said. You just don't like him anymore, otherwise you wouldn't have given up your child together. He can't see it clearly, but I can see it crystal clear. Ellen Harvey, I told you to shut up. I won't. Ellen's eyes were wide, looking at Cyrus with grievance and at me with hatred. Can't you just stay away from our lives? If it wasn't for you deliberately running off abroad and causing this mess, we would have started over already. I looked at Ellen silently. I didn't want to argue with someone who was being unreasonable. They only ever spoke from emotion, not logic. So I turned to Cyrus. Control this situation. People will call the police for this kind of disturbance. Ellen tried to lunge at me again, but Cyrus grabbed her, his face dark. Can you stop making a scene? I don't know what happened between them after that. I saw Cyrus again 2 days later. Fresh daisies. I just bought them, he said. He had a placating smile on his face. I walked past him expressionlessly. He grabbed me. It's not what you heard. There's nothing between Ellen and me. I've sent her back home. She won't come bother you again. I took a deep breath. Then can you also stop bothering me? Cyrus trembled. Do you have to be so cold? I was wrong, I admit it. But Amelia, you weren't entirely right either. Wasn't there a better choice back then? Did you really have to abort the baby? What else could I have done? I asked softly. But Cyrus still heard me. My wrist slipped from his palm. You always say I'm cold-hearted, that I only weigh pros and cons. That's because the cost of my mistakes is so much higher than yours. You could skip school, take all your holiday money and want to elope with me. Missing university entrance exams wasn't important to you. You could retake them, go abroad, start over at any time. But that was my one chance to rewrite my life. That child, I could have kept it. We could have communicated, tried. It didn't have to lead to the worst outcome. But I didn't have the courage to risk it. A life I didn't know to what extent it would tie me down. I, who grew up in a broken home, what could I offer a child? I didn't know that either. One path was full of uncertainties. The other was one I was sure of. I could only choose the latter. Before I turned 20, I lived by one word: escape. I was born into a family that was bad in a typical way. My mother said my father used to be good. He loved her, valued her, cherished her. Everything changed when I was born. The child my mother gave birth to at the cost of her health was a daughter, unable to carry on the family name. My father took one look, turned and left, not caring about my mother in the hospital bed or me. The newborn crying for food. Even my name was given by a teacher in the same ward. My father began drinking heavily, gambling, and beating people. When I was little, my mother would often cry and say I was a money-losing burden. That it was all because of me, that it was all my fault. As I grew older, I started protecting my mother. She relied on me while resenting me, and told me not to hate my father. Later, she started hitting me too. The first time I suggested she get a divorce, she went mad, saying I had already ruined her life and now wanted to destroy it completely. At that moment, I knew I had to escape. Now I've almost cut off contact with them, only sending them a fixed amount of money each month for support. I don't care if they slander or curse me. From then on, I lived by two other words: myself. I'm glad I've taken good care of myself. So I don't allow any deviation along the way. I won't shortchange myself. Cyrus Foster's face was full of pain. If you had just talked to me properly, if we could have discussed things. But there are no ifs in this world. Cyrus, we simply drifted apart. You have to accept that. And I never retrace my steps. I saw Cyrus Foster again the day after I returned to the country. Delia happily invited me out for a meal. Cyrus was in another private room. I ran into him coming out of the bathroom when I went to wash my hands. He looked somewhat disheveled, having obviously just thrown up. Seeing me, he instinctively straightened up. You're back in the country? Yes. Are you leaving again? After the new year. Happy New Year in advance. Cyrus was stunned. Delia said Cyrus wasn't doing well these days. The IPO failed, he couldn't restore his father's business. And his mother was very disappointed in him, slapping him in public. Did you foresee all this? I nodded. The Sunbright Group was the key. If it had been the old Cyrus, he wouldn't have missed it. Perhaps things had been going too smoothly. Or perhaps our relationship had robbed him of too much reason. He had become arrogant and conceited. Now, while not starting from scratch, he was struggling at every step. Ellen was still by Cyrus's side, never leaving. She had learned to drink now, and no longer teared up at others' words. This shared experience of hardship might actually lead to a happy ending for them. Delia asked, "Do you feel resentful? Do you wish for their business to fail and their relationship to end bitterly?" I shook my head. Life is a process of constantly making choices. Once you choose, you accept and move forward without looking back. Family, friendship, love, career, studies, hobbies. Each is just a small part of what makes up a life. In this world, in the end, the only one who accompanies you is yourself. Raise yourself well, take good care of yourself. Make the most of this journey through life, and don't let yourself down.